So all that being said, the state's allegations against Bryan Kohberger make about as much sense as a northern teacher telling a southern student in grade school to sound it out when dealing with spelling. I mean, serious, lady, have you heard how we talk?
Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
You believe that you have your guy and that there won't be further arrests made in regards to these.
That is correct. We believe we have our guy.
I mean, to be honest, you're going to have to trust us on that at this point because we're not going to release why we think that.
Let's talk about the possibility of something that's been on the back of my mind for some time but never been discussed, since it came up recently and it's not necessarily far-fetched. When you consider the state is seemingly trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. So welcome to the point where we try to the best of our ability to avoid the echo chamber, and all I ask is that you be respectful in the comments section. Since everything said here is alleged, please do your own research, form your own opinion, and let me know that opinion, because this is an open discussion channel where we try to be fair. And if more fair coverage on this story and others is something you're lacking, subscribe to this channel and hit that like button down below. Because the state's allegations just don't make sense. They are trying to say that in the early morning hours, Bryan Kohberger left his apartment in Pullman, Washington, crossed state lines with his phone off or in airplane mode to commit a quadruple passing, or at the very least pass away one individual. Which of course then means that the other 2 or 3 individuals that were passed away during this incident were not premeditated, so how can they be first degree? But that's a separate conversation. But that is the quick and dirty overview, since all of us are very familiar with the probable cause affidavit. But crossing state lines for the purposes of committing a passing is a federal crime. Now I know that the states get to bite from that apple, but has anyone heard about federal charges? Unless, of course, this is the one time that Big Brother doesn't want to put their hands in the cookie jar, which also doesn't seem likely. But people are also forgetting that this was a home game that night. And we know that people were up during that hour because we've all seen this footage right here. And we now know exactly how sound travels in that area thanks to this body cam conversation.
Yeah, almost all college students.
People up on the hill probably didn't know most of them.
Yep. And this is kind of like a fishbowl in here, so if they get party, it echoes crazy.
But of course no one heard a thing, which is why I've always said this story makes way more sense with more than one suspect. The overall time of attack according to the state is lightning fast, and I mean absolutely lightning fast. But you're saying this guy did this. This guy right here, he was able to do all this while none of these victims were able to make a sound. Now 2 people increase the odds of this being possible, or 2 people and 1 driver. Because now you have 2 people committing this crime while the driver is circling the neighborhood throwing the timeline off. Think about it for a second. The driver could circle the home and ensure everything is the exact way they want it to be before they go in, pull into a dark area because no light equals no witnesses, drop off the 2 attackers, and continue to circle the area until he gets some sort of signal or his maximum drive time is met and he goes back to the home to pick up the other 2 attackers. But the states insisted this crime was committed by one person. And that one person just happens to be reportedly an intelligent individual who's a criminology major seeking a PhD, making him the dumbest PhD student in the Pacific Northwest. Unless the problem here is we're just not thinking about this story like a criminal would. Now a couple of things first. I can't say it's impossible, but I'm not fully behind the idea that 1122 was some sort of party favorable central distribution hub. Because I've looked at all the pictures and TikToks of those 4 individuals and the other occupants of the home, and I can't necessarily say I've seen that glossed over, glazed, dilated pupil look you would normally see with individuals doing some type of serious party favor, with the exception of 1 individual allegedly. And while I'm not a criminal, I can say I've dealt with that annoying voice in the back of your head thanks to bad medical practices 2 decades ago, and shout out to the medical community for addressing that issue because what y'all were doing was wrong. Now that was a long time ago, it took a couple of years, but it's dealt with. I'm good, I'm not going back. But we also can't say it's ridiculous because we all know this type of stuff does go on in our universities. And I also went to college, and I know that students don't exclusively hang out with other students of the same school. These individuals mix and mingle with other students of other schools and go to all type of social functions, as well as parties regardless of the area it's in. So all that being said, the state's allegations against Bryan Kohberger make about as much sense as a northern teacher telling a southern student in grade school to sound it out when dealing with spelling. I mean, serious lady, have you heard how we talk? So what about the potential theory that Bryan Kohberger's the straw guy or the fall guy? Let's think about that for a second. It has been reported and alleged that Bryan Kohberger suffered from a party favor problem, and he was also up at odd hours of the night, which to me personally sounds like an individual who's still currently struggling with something, right? And since we all know that the college party scene is a small circle, what if someone who knew the victims knew that they could lure Bryan Kohberger out and pin all this on him? That could potentially explain why his car was allegedly seen at or near the scene during the time of this attack. That would explain the whole no connection with any one of the victims' statements that we've all heard in court. It would explain why he would seemingly disregard the fact that there are security cameras all over the place surrounding the home. Most importantly, it explains the lack of DNA found in the home, the car, and the apartment that we know of. Maybe that is his sheath, and maybe he did own a K-bar, but maybe he exchanged the K-bar along with a little bit of money for a baggie, if you know what I mean. It's also a very real possibility that explains why he's absolutely not saying a thing. Because while the party circle is small, their reach is absolutely long. And as some of you know, there's no honor among thieves anymore, and so in that scenario, when Bryan Kohberger tells on somebody and that individual is approached by law enforcement, they only partially confirm what Bryan Kohberger says, and then offer to testify on the state's behalf in order to work out some sort of deal. And what was intended to be Bryan telling the truth now has turned into a scenario where he's made an enemy. And while those individuals may lack honor, they certainly don't lack mercy, which brings me to the other group of people that you don't absolutely say anything about. They are tight and closely organized, and everyone around those individuals knows you absolutely don't say anything, or something could happen to you, a possible loved one, or a family member. I mean, if I'm wrong, okay, but this doesn't sound like it's out of the realm of possible. If we are wanting answers and explanations right now, this particular theory does make a square peg a little bit rounder. It is, of course, a theory, but this attack sounds so personal. This attack sounds like this suspect knew one or all of these victims and they had a very serious problem with them. I still think the theory that more than one person committing this crime makes more sense, but this theory does in a lot of ways tie into that. Unless I'm just completely wrong, which is also possible. Maybe you'll let me know down in the comments. Y'all be safe now.